Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Professional Firefighters of Monroe County podcast. My name is Oliver Hodek. I'm the president of Professional Firefighters of Monroe County, Local 3909, the Firefighters Union. I'm joined by Lieutenant Tony Perez. He works mainly out of Station 10, but he's worked at just about every station in Monroe County. He's also a past union president from years back, and this is going to be our first episode of our Coffee Talk podcast. And our goal with this is kind of going to be to introduce our fire department, to kind of talk about what we do so the public and possibly new members and, even visitors of Monroe County that might run across this kind of have an idea, who's serving them on the street or in the air, in the air and on the street. So for those that would like to be more informed about, their local firefighters and their fire department, this is kind of going to be our platform for that, for you guys to kind of either educate or just, hopefully, keep you guys in the loop with everything, from our end, from your local firefighters. So to start off, we have various stations throughout the Keys. So a lot of people might not even know is we have the Key West Airport. That's our Station 7. Station 8 is in Stock Island. Station 9, Big Coppet. Station 10, Sugarloaf Key. 11 is in Cudjoe. 13 is Big Pine. And then we have a big gap, and we go to 17, which is in Conch Key, which is right there by Hawks Cay, kind of, for those that might not know. It's a tiny island, but Conch Key Station responds to Hawks Cay. And then next one will be 18, which is Layton. And then there's another gap, and our next station is Station 22. For those that and we have the Trauma Star helicopter. So
yes,
that's
we have the sheriff's hangar in Marathon.
Yeah. So we have one helicopter stationed down at the hospital, and the other one is in Marathon at the sheriff's hangar at the Marathon Airport. So I guess that would be considered the main Trauma Star station, but we have crews in, one Station 8 in Stock Island that responds out of the hospital, and then we have a crew at the sheriff's hangar in Marathon, and that would be, I guess, considered our main Trauma Star station. And then so I guess the way that kind of happened, because people might be wondering, so Key West, City of Key West is their own fire department, City of Marathon is its own fire department, Isla Morada is its own fire department, and Key Largo, which I think Key Largo is like a combination, volunteer part-time or full, I'm not really sure, but I know it's a combination department still, in Key Largo. So the way that kind of happened back when I think the Keys were getting started, probably 30 years ago now, everybody kind of figured out, we're going to do our city departments. We're going to have, people
the areas, like the areas that incorporated. Yeah. The areas that incorporated first. So like your big cities, Key West, I think was the first one, because they have
the oldest department in the country, actually. One of the oldest departments.
They have a 3-digit local, so
it's 1400, but they didn't get unionized till later. Mm-hmm. But they still, I don't know, there's the fire museum in Key West. They have photos of the horse carriages still. That's awesome. That's so awesome. So they're one of the oldest fire departments in the country, but they unionized a little later, I think.
Nice. So all the incorporated areas, they're the ones that have their own respective fire departments. And then we pretty much cover all of unincorporated Monroe County.
We filled in the areas that nobody wanted to deal with back then.
Yeah, just areas that didn't come together, that they didn't incorporate onto themselves. Monroe County Fire Rescue picked up, and we provide coverage for those stations, for those areas there. So Layton, Conch Key, everything in between.
Yeah, because back then the department, the fire rescue aspect of it happened in 98, 99, 98. It was between those 2 years.
Yes.
The fire rescue got put together, and before that we had, I think it was Florida Keys or Monroe County EMS or something like that. It was only ambulance service, and then all the fire protection was volunteer back then.
Yes.
So there's no professional.
There was a bunch of different volunteer fire organizations. They had their own thing. And then Monroe County EMS provided the ambulances and the paramedics and EMTs. And
in 98, they decided to bring that together. Mm-hmm. And it was because I think the growth, people started to see the growth in the Keys. And they were like, we need actually fire rescue services, the volunteer. And back then, too, it's crazy because they thought they were like, we need to start thinking about this on the career side, whatever that looked like back then in 98. But the growth was already starting, and back then you still had volunteers. I think volunteers volunteering is a very, I think, a middle class thing, right? where
Yes.
people do it when they can, how they can, on their days off or whatever, to like kind of try to help their
Yeah,
community.
historically speaking, volunteer. I mean, not just volunteer, but historically speaking,
Firefighting overall.
firefighting in general is a
Community,
blue collar trade. You know, most of the guys and the girls now that would do it, it was carpenters, plumbers, electricians. You know, guys that would work in the trades, and then they just, you know,
Volunteered.
they were adept at firefighting, so they would do both. And I think when it was a volunteer organization, it was kind of the same thing. You had these blue collar workers that, you know, weren't afraid to get their hands dirty, and they just volunteered.
Yeah.
And I think it's still, for the most part, I mean, it's we've kind of leaned away from that a little bit.
Well, I think especially in the Keys, because you know, the cost of living so high. It's no secret. Everybody knows that,
Yeah.
right? Cost of living so high, and then, you know, people are so busy, you know, working and providing for their families. Nobody has time, you know, after working 2, sometimes even 3 jobs. Some people down here work 3 jobs, right, to
Yep.
survive. So nobody even has time to, like, you know, at midnight hop up in the middle of the night when you're sleeping and go
Yeah.
to a house fire, right? So I think as kind of like, you know, cost of living goes up and the middle class kind of fizzles out a little bit, you know, the volunteer approach is not viable anymore.
Yeah,
you know?
I mean, eventually too, once the Keys boomed, it also became a large retirement community, right? So everybody sort of did their, you know, they did their time, so to speak. They worked, they did their 9 to 5s or whatever it was that they were doing for, you know, till they retired. And then they came down here, and it was just to enjoy a life of luxury, you know, kick back, go fishing. So
Yeah.
I think that also had a lot to do with it, you know, with sort of the volunteer organizations phasing out. And I think once that started happening, you know, Monroe County, I guess they just recognized that there was a need to evolve, and it made sense to merge fire and rescue.
Yeah. I mean, how many? Because like I started in the volunteer service, right? That's how I got my start in this job. You know, I did about 3 to 4 years prior volunteer at Station 9 in Bicopit, and that was kind of, you served both zones as a volunteer, right? You provided for Stock Island and Bicopit back then. It was, you know, those 2 stations were combined. Then it was like Sugarloaf Key volunteers, and it went up from there.
Yeah.
And then, you know, even starting in that system, it was taxing, because, you know, I was able to get my start there. But I can tell you right now, like, trying to, because I had, you know, multiple jobs in the Keys, you know, same thing, volunteering, you know, I was just starting my, you know, personal life and everything. So the volunteer on top of that, and like after you dealing with you know, your day-to-day life stuff, it's difficult to kind of hop up and go whenever there's a call. Mind you, you're responding from your house. So you could, as a volunteer, you could be eating dinner, or you could be shopping with your kids or something, and a call goes out, you get a pager, right? And then the response time too is just, like you said, we have a big retirement community now, so the need for medical services arises. So I'll tell you this, you know, somebody that's been on both sides, like the first few years of my firefighting career, I guess, would be on the volunteer side, and then going, you know, over 10, coming up on 15 years almost soon, being on the paid side. I tell you, the services aren't even comparable when it comes to, and it's like, you don't know that when you're a volunteer. You think it's the same job, but then you get exposed to this whole other evolved aspect of it once you become career and you're doing it as your trade, the day-to-day. You get exposed to the professional medical services, you know, whether that's, you know, running your cardiacs and traumas, you know, high-speed vehicle accidents, to, you know, dealing with transferring patients to the helicopters and things like that. Like, it's not, I can tell you right now from like my own personal experience, somebody who's lived in the community for a long time and done both, the services aren't even comparable, you know, when you look at like a volunteer versus paid service.
Yeah, I mean, just the structure of it, if you were to compare it, it's difficult to compare the efficiency of response and the service delivery that you get between a volunteer and a paid organization. And it's never in any way meant to knock volunteers, because volunteers, they did it for love of the craft. Right.
Yep.
But when it came time that, you know, municipalities, county governments, when they started recognizing that there was a need to increase the level of service, it just made sense to transition to a paid department, to have personnel on staff 24/7 that can respond from a, you know, somewhat centrally located station within the respective zones.
Because the EMS need was there recognized since the beginning, if you really think about it, because it started as Monroe County EMS.
Yeah.
So the medical service was always, I guess you call it professional, right? Back then, because it was the standalone ambulance
they were paid,
service.
I believe that they were paid and they transported and they covered a wider area than what we do now.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember old stories from guys that were here during the EMS days, and they say that they would run calls from Stock Island all the way to Big Pine.
Must have been crazy. Just on the ambulance running
Wild.
from Stock Island to Big Pine.
Wild.
And that's too, that like goes to show how much we've evolved, having all these stations everywhere and like, staffed ambulances and trucks, that like the speed that you need to respond for serious issues like cardiacs, where you have the small windows to really get there and make a difference, in that small window. Like, it shows that, the counties recognize that, but it's like we're still, sometimes I feel like we're still running minimum staffing, you know what I mean? And I think we're still kind of fighting a little bit with that, like, oh, the service used to be volunteer and it used to be free, but maybe some people still don't really get why the paid side is necessary, right? I mean, how many times, you being at Station 10, how many times do you get like, oh, thank you, Sugarloaf volunteers?
Oh, I get it. I get it. I mean, me personally, just me, that I work on just one shift, I can probably say that since I've been here at 10, and for 5 years now since I got promoted, I could probably say it's happened at least over a dozen times that we've responded to emergencies, and people will say, "Oh, you're out of the Sugarloaf volunteer fire station, right?" And no, ma'am, no, sir. Like, we don't, we're not a volunteer organization anymore. We're Monroe County Fire Rescue. We operate out of the fire station at Sugarloaf, and they genuinely have no clue. Genuinely have no clue, and it's a lot about, I think it's a lot about, number one, it's just lack of information being put out there.
Like public education.
It's a public education thing. People call 911 because they have an emergency, and they expect someone who is competent and capable and confident to show up and resolve their problems.
Yeah.
They don't really know. It's almost like when you go to buy a car, right? You go to buy a car, you expect a quality product, but you're not aware of where that car was manufactured, if they had a change in, quality assurance or the manner in which they put the car together.
Yeah.
The end user, the end consumer is typically not aware of those types of changes. And it's sort of, that analogy can be likened to us. When we made the transition from a volunteer to a complete paid organization, we, the organization, administration as a whole, they probably realized the obvious increase in service delivery, efficiency of response, and organization. But to the end user, maybe to them, depending on whether or not they're the type of person that calls 911 more than a couple times a year, they just maybe saw that, now these guys have different uniforms, and now they're showing up in more trucks, and it's more people showing up at the same time, and they're getting here a little bit faster.
We do a lot of education on like prevention side, but I think, and I always come back to like, I feel like no matter how you look at it, like this is a very, like a humble profession, from the sense of like, we don't do this for praise. Nobody really gets this job for praise, right? If you do it that way, you're for the wrong reasons, and you're really not going to last long, honestly, because there's a very little of it, I say. And I say that, as a union president, but, like I said, I feel like that's why we kind of fall behind on like that public education aspect of it. Like, hey, these are the services we provide to the community. These are our abilities. You do have fully staffed professional firefighters in Monroe County. So we kind of fall behind on that public education a little bit, and that's kind of the union's goal with this, and the union too. Like, the union is 100% member funded, right? Anything you see with like Professional Firefighters of Monroe County on it is 100% membership funded. Like, it's funded by you or other people in the field, essentially. And so it's not really a burden to the taxpayers. So I think it's good that we're kind of taking that on ourselves, as the Monroe County firefighters, to educate the public a little bit. Yeah,
it's dues that we pay out of our paycheck, so it doesn't come out of taxpayer dollars or anything like that. It's we join the union, we pay dues, and out of those dues is what we utilize to, do something like this podcast for public education, or like we've talked about with, sponsoring.
Yeah, so when you see, like, for the public, if you see, like, professional firefighters in Monroe County or county firefighters on your kids' little league teams, just know that's not taxpayer funded. That's member funded stuff, and that comes from the firefighters to be involved in our community.
Yeah, any merchandise that we do hats, we do shirts, we do stickers, patches, any of that stuff. Like, that's not, belt buckles. It's not taxpayer funded. That is
Right.
all 100%
by the members themselves, by the Monroe County
themselves.
firefighters.
We pay into that.
So to just I guess circle back to that, we can real quick, since we brought up the union thing. So we were incorporated as Monroe County Fire Rescue in 98, 99, like
Yes.
that whole thing happened there. And back then we also unionized at the same time.
Yes.
And I remember I pulled our original roster from 98, and it was like, dude, I want to say like 30, 40 people back then.
Yeah.
We're now at, I would say the union is around 150 members, give or take, when people are leaving or coming. So we're around 150, 155, 150 members. And then the department itself, I would probably say, is close to 200 personnel, maybe. Like, if you count the non-unionized positions and administration and everything.
Administrative personnel.
The people that help us keep running, logistics and all that stuff. So, so all
logistics,
everything else.
Billing division.
Yeah, we're probably pushing like 200 people overall.
I would say close to that.
Yeah, and back then the original roster was 30, 40 people, and we just had a recent retiree, Captain Seven, retired. He was our original one of the original roster members on there.
Yes,
and he retired after 30 years, I think it was, or something like that, here with the county. So he retired after 30 years, and thinking of like what the growth that the county's seen now over just the last few years, like I can't even imagine what those people back then had to deal with, like building the department from scratch. I mean, you want to talk about real quick, like the involvement of the Trauma Star program itself. Like, that's because you're a flight medic on the helicopter.
Yes.
So like just from where that started, from where like Captain Seven back in the day, he was a firefighter paramedic back then, but he was one of the ones that like helped start that, kick it off, and there were old helicopters and all that.
I mean, he rode on the trucks. He was on the ambulance service was there, so he would transport. He was one of the first flight medics that got on back when it was the old Huey. Yeah. And he would tell stories about how they would respond to an emergency.
In a Vietnam Huey.
In his Vietnam Huey, just chopping rotor blades. He would respond in the rescue to the call, assess, treat the patient, package the patient, rendezvous with Trauma Star, get out, change clothes, hop in the Huey, throw his helmet on, go take the patient to whatever hospital they were going to in the mainland. They'd come back, and he'd have to rendezvous again with the rescue, so they would come pick him up afterwards. Yeah. And that was his gig. And he did that for a long time. Timmy Leonard was the same way, retired Captain McAnally, another one. He did it the exact same way. I'm sure there's a couple other
crazy if you think about it. Like the way now you being a flight medic, like if you like the process you go through now, like you're there, you're staffed.
Yeah, we're stationed. Yeah, that's how it used to be before. Once we transitioned, that the program underwent its changes. Obviously, it's run jointly by the sheriff's office and fire rescue.
They provide the maintenance. Yeah. The pilots,
they provide
the medical staff.
The pilots, sort of like an administrative level, staff there to keep things running on the day-to-day. There's a lot of things that we have to keep up to snuff with the FAA to maintain.
A lot of regulations when it comes to running that service.
Our Part 135 that allows us to transport from hospital to hospital. Like if someone goes to Lower Keys and whatever service they need isn't provided there, it allows us to transport them up to.
Yeah, because people see a helicopter and they think like, oh, just they're just transporting patients. They just go. But there's a lot of like that. A lot of work the county administration, not even fire rescue administration, but the county has to deal with to make sure that service runs, is certified, and is available for people here in the Keys. Like there's a lot that goes into that.
Yes.
That in reality, that's why you pay taxes. I think at the end of the day, you really don't need to or shouldn't worry about that, right? You just want to know. Helicopters are staffed, helicopters are available. If I have an emergency or my kid has an emergency, with no pediatric centers. And so I think, the county, there goes a lot into those helicopters, and just like from your end on it, now that you've been on a helicopter for like how many years?
I've been on since 2016. So I got on right before, like a little bit before Hurricane Irma came through. So yeah, I mean, next year will make a decade that I've been on the bird. And it's I mean, we were one helicopter, one aircraft back then, handling, we're centrally located at the sheriff's hangar in Marathon. We would respond from all the way south. We had the dry Tortugas that we respond to as well, all the way north to Ocean Reef. And then we went into what they called the 1.5 program, which is when we purchased the second helicopter. We had one 24-hour aircraft, fully staffed, and then we had a 12-hour staffed aircraft. And that was just, due to growing pains, and they had to revise, and
it was new. It was new for the county. Everybody was trying to figure it out.
They needed staffing. Again, I'm not going to speak for the sheriff's office, but it was a big thing. And then we finally transitioned to 2 full-time birds. Another thing too, a lot of people, the general public, don't know that it happens all the time. And I mean, if I had $1 for every time I heard it, I mean, I probably wouldn't be here right now. I can't fly, I can't afford it. Most people don't understand that if you are a Monroe County resident, you don't pay anything out of pocket for utilizing TraumaStar. That is, life-saving care, anything cardiac related, anything neurological, a stroke, any sort of trauma-related case, any drowning, anything like that requires a specialty that is not provided within the hospitals of Monroe County. You get flown out, and if you are a resident of the county, that is no out-of-pocket cost.
And I'm a big proponent. I'm very open about that every time I speak to anybody about how important that service is, because I have 2 kids, right? One's in high school, she's about to graduate, and the other one, she's 7 years old, she's in 1st grade, and there's no pediatric facilities in the Keys, so anything happens if you have kids, and God forbid something happens to them, you are very, very dependent on that helicopter if you have children in Monroe County. I think a lot of people don't realize that either, so other than because we don't have any specialty facilities in the Keys, right? I mean, most people that live here know that just by trying to go to a doctor's appointment, that's a specialty, you're usually getting referred out. Same thing with the hospital, all of our hospitals in the Keys are, I guess, what would you call them, like general care hospitals?
Yeah, they're general care hospitals. Like Lower Keys, I know that they've gone back and forth with having a cardiac cath lab that can treat patients that are having heart attacks and stuff like that. But it's, they're going through their growing pains as well. Sometimes it's functioning, sometimes it's not. But for the most part, the 3 hospitals down here, they don't have any, obstetrics. So any pregnancy issues, they can't treat that. Trauma alerts, any significant trauma, any significant cardiac event, neurological. So if you're having a stroke or anything like that, there's a lot of things, any orthopedic, cardiac, neurological, all those things that we run up on day to day. These hospitals down here just aren't treated, or they're not staffed or adequately equipped to treat them, and that's why TraumaStar itself is such a vital resource.
That's why it's important too. And I think we'll touch on the fire rescue stuff more, but I think that we have like the 2, I would call them like specialty stations, right? You got Station 7 in Key West, which is the airport, and they provide the IAFF services there. That's whole separate certifications. Like that's evolved jobs on its own, where you go get certified for airport firefighting, and they also provide the medical services there at the airport.
Correct. At
the ready, like they're there 24/7. Staff at the airport. Anybody has an emergency, medical emergency, they're there. We have charged paramedics there too. So that's fully staffed. That's like our specialty station. And then you have TraumaStar, really one of the only, I believe we are the only firefighters union that also has the nursing staff on.
Yes.
And that's very important, I think, for the public to have those nurses, because that allows that helicopter the transport services.
Well, I mean, the degree of knowledge and expertise that the nurses have, because that's the thing too, like our hiring process for nurses is pretty stringent.
Yeah.
It's not like we hire a brand new nurse that just took their NCLEX the other day. A lot of our nurses, just as the sheriff's office only employs pilots with like military experience, it's the same thing for us. Almost all of our nurses have significant experience, whether it's in a trauma center or some sort of cardiac facility.
A lot of them are still employed at trauma centers.
Oh my God, they have so many acronyms behind their names.
Yeah,
it's
the alphabet soup.
Behind their name, and they're just, and it just goes to show, like they earned those laurels. They get on this aircraft, and it's somebody who's really sick, and they are your absolute best chance of survival, of getting to the mainland. It's a huge thing to have these nurses back there, with the capabilities that we do have, limited capabilities, but they get to work and they do great work.
And it's like anything else, they have, and you'll be able to speak on it probably better than me because I'm not really sure what the requirement is, but there's a years of service requirement for the nurses to be flight nurses to, work, trauma centers or like ERs. They do have a certain years of service requirement because you can't just throw a brand new nurse on a helicopter. They got to have that exposure from like a trauma center or wherever else,
Yeah, when the nurses go through the application process here, and again, I mean, I've sat in on a couple processes like the panel interviews and stuff like that. But I do know that they look for extensive experience.
Yeah,
they want to know that you've been through the crucible.
You can work by yourself.
You can work, yes, because that's the thing. In the back of the aircraft, it is just you and a flight medic and a bunch of medications and equipment. It's a toolbox, and they want to know that you can pick anything from that toolbox and you can make it work, to get that patient safely from point A to point B.
Yeah. Yeah, so that, the flight nurse, a lot of people don't even know that, like, it's part of Monroe County Fire Rescue and how important that is. That it's, like I said, I'm not going to beat a dead horse, but like even myself, anybody that has kids, is heavily dependent on that helicopter. I mean, and it just shows the growth of the county, right? The Trauma Star programs evolved greatly. Key West Airport, I mean, is getting rebuilt right now because they're setting record numbers every month of people coming to the Keys. I mean, literally every month, I think, every time I see that newsletter, it's they've set a new record of passengers coming through there.
Well,
so
enough so that they've been talking about it for a while now with Marathon Airport, right?
Yeah, I think there's been talks, but I'm not really sure what, I think they're focused on finishing Key West Airport. I'm not really sure like what, timeline on that is to start providing commercial flights. Or,
no. Well,
I don't even know what
I'm
the
just
involvement.
I'm just saying it's a testament to the growth
of Monroe County.
To the growth of Monroe County as a whole. The fact that what is considered a just local municipal airport, now they are considering whether or not it would be beneficial for the county as a whole to start to transition that from a local to a commercial airport.
And it just goes to show like the need for the firefighting services in the Keys. It's not just like, we provide services for the citizens. It's the visitor numbers are huge.
Booming.
What I mean? So, and how many car accidents you get that are like visitors because they're driving down US 1 not paying attention. I mean, and I think that's different to like our department too is within Monroe County, we have a lot of like high speed accidents. We're one of a few departments in Monroe County that has like a high speed stuff. So it's, for us, like geographically, depending what station you work at, right? Like me, we're very like, to be a Monroe County firefighter, I think what I'm trying to say is you have to be able to do so many different things because all of our stations are kind of different, right? When it comes to transport time, calls, even call types, right? So you could be working at Station 8, where I'm stationed out of regularly, and, transport times are 15, 20 minutes, hospitals right there, right? Helicopters right there. But then you could be, at Station 13 in Big Pine, where your transport times could be a few hours.
Yeah, I mean, depending on where you respond to in Big Pine, from the beginning of the call to the end of the call, it could be well over a couple hours.
Right. So
over a couple hours from dispatch to getting there. I mean, if you go way down to the end of No Name Key, or even if you're in Sugarloaf, if you drive all the way down Sugarloaf Boulevard, you hang a right at Old State Road 4A, and you go all the way down. Think about it. You could easily have a 20-25 minute drive before you even arrive at the scene.
Yeah, so let's talk about that. So because like right now we've grown, right? And we talked about the growth that's happened in Monroe County, and it's obvious that the growth's happened. It's just I don't know if it's keeping up, right? Because we're running 2 and 2, right? Which is it's just least than most departments are running. It's minimum staffing. We're up the standard and per ISO and everything, right? But we're essentially running 2 on a truck, 2 on a rescue. If it's a fire call, 4 hop on the truck and you respond to a fire, right?
Correct. So our minimum staffing is 4 personnel at every station. That is our minimum staffing as of the last few years. Before that, we had certain stations, which were typically in the busier areas based on call volume, that were staffed with 4 personnel every shift. And the stations in between were staffed with 3.
Your station at Station 10 now. I mean, back in the day, it was what? It was 4 guys in Stock Island, 2 in Big Coppet, right? And
4
then
in Stock
nobody
Island,
here.
2 in Big Coppet, and it was 3 in Big Coppet.
Yeah.
And then it was 2 here.
Well, in the beginning, it was nobody, and then there was the part-time ambulance, right, with the 2 guys.
Oh, you're talking about way back.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
yes,
part-time ambulance, and
Yes.
then it finally went to 2 guys, fully staffed at Station
Yes.
10, and now it's finally, we got 4 at every station.
Yes. Less than 10 years ago, when I got hired, Station 10, it was 2 personnel. It was only 2 personnel here that would respond. There wasn't an ambulance service provided here. It was just an engine and a tanker, and it was 2 personnel responding out of that truck.
Mm-hmm.
And then it became 3, which that happened probably about 5 years ago, and it was an adaptive response, which for those that don't know, all that means is that if it's a medical call, we would take all our stuff, hop in the rescue, and respond. If it's a fire call or anything related to a car accident or something like that, we would take all our stuff, switch over, hop into the engine, which for us, it was the tanker at the time, and then we would respond in that vehicle. Then certain stations, again, the ones that were more busier, based on call volume, they had 4 personnel fully staffed. Then a few years back, we transitioned and we went minimum staffing. Every station for Monroe County Fire Rescue now has 4 personnel on shift. Depending on certain days, we may have 5, if there's no vacancies, but 4 is the minimum that we're allowed to have every day. That's the standard that we have set. That is the minimum standard that we have set. Now, traditionally speaking, if you go to, let's say, like the mainland, Florida,
Key
South
West
Florida.
is running fully staffed.
Well, Key West runs fully staffed, so they'll run what, 2 or 3 on a rescue?
Yeah, I think it's 2 or 3 depending on the rescue, and then you got the
4 on a suppression unit, which a suppression unit counts as either an engine, a ladder truck, or a regular traditional truck within the fire service. But within the Keys, it's mostly minimum staffing. You go into South Florida, Miami-Dade Fire Rescue, Palm Beach County Fire Rescue. Those are sort of your standard for fire rescue staffing, which is 4 on a suppression unit. So 4 bodies at all times on a suppression unit, and then 3 on a rescue or an ambulance is what most people would call it. So for most places in South Florida, you're looking at a minimum of 7 personnel on staff every shift. Whereas for us, we have 4. Now, the good thing is that our administration specifically has understood, and they are very well aware, and they have expressed a lot of desire in increasing that staffing. They see the need for it.
Yeah, because I mean, right? you're like, you've been Station 10. If you're getting a call in the back of Sugarloaf Boulevard, not to mention, at a certain point, you don't have any hydrants anymore, right? So
no water sources, depending on
drafting and things like that.
Like for us, again, for the public that doesn't know, I mean, our water sources, we have water that is stored in a tank in the trucks. How much water depends on the truck. So if it's an engine, you'll typically have 1,000. If it's a ladder, you typically have around, sub 400, 450 to 350. If you're operating out of a tanker, that's, anywhere from 2,500 to 3,000.
Yeah.
Which the tankers come in handy, especially if you're responding to a more rural area in your zone that does not have fire hydrants.
Yeah, which we do have those tankers in those zones that essentially.
Yes. So, for example, if I am in Sugarloaf and I go down Sugarloaf Boulevard, I have a hydrant. I literally every stone's throw I have a hydrant. But once I get to Old State Road 4A, which you have the jumping bridge and you have the rest, jumping bridge to one side and just the rest of Old State Road, there are no water sources back there. There's very little to no drafting sites for us to pull water. So that's why it's important to have the water on these trucks, but it's also important as to why it's beneficial to have more hands, because if it takes us from our station 25 minutes to get to a call, and let's say it is a fire, it would be beneficial for us to have more hands on scene so we can get the work done. A lot of people don't understand. It's never as simple as, hey, grab the hose off the truck, go put water on the fire. It's never that simple. There's a lot of things.
Strategic, and that comes with experience too, right? And I think we've been because of, I think, our location and things like, the wages and things like that haven't been competitive. And part of that is, I think, transitioning from like the volunteer service to career, right? That stuff hasn't been too competitive. We've been like a transitional department essentially, right? And like a lot of that, what you're talking about, comes with experience, knowing how to utilize the tools you've been given, right? Like you responding to back of Sugarloaf Boulevard where there is no hydrants, you got to make the decision like, hey, I can put this fire out what I got, or the second unit may be drafting, but even if you call the second unit, hey, you got to pull a draft. Pulling a draft, for those who don't know, you're basically pulling water out of a static body of water, whether it's a canal, somebody's pool, whatever. And that almost ties up a whole crew. So if you're responding, with your crew, you're still kind of by yourself. Putting out the fire if the other crew is pulling it, things like doing the draft.
I think for the most part, a lot of it is, and we've said this before, you don't know what you don't know.
Right.
And that applies not only to firemen, administrative staff, it also applies to the general public. We don't know what we don't know. And someone calls 911, 4 people show up, they can't really tell the difference.
Right.
And level of experience. Maybe they can pick up on certain social cues such as confidence, body language, things like that, if they're that intuitive or if they're that perceptive. But for the most part, they call 911, 4 people wearing MCFR uniforms show up, and they take care of the call. And again, I think a big truth of the fire service is that not all firemen are created equal, and that's why experience is so valuable. There's education, and then there's wisdom. Education comes from going to school, minimum standards fire academy, paramedic school, EMT school, paramedic school. That's what gives you your education.
That's the minimum standard.
It's the minimum, right? We have our clinicals that we have to log a certain amount of hours in a hospital. We have our ride-alongs that we're supposed to ride with a fire department, right? So we can become exposed to some of these calls and understand a little bit about the job and the culture. But true experience comes from when you get onto your fire department and being able to run those calls. There is value, a lot of value, in a 1-year employee versus a 10-year employee. That 10-year employee is tenured here. They've ran those
exposure.
Calls. They've been exposed to the bad accidents, to the bad cardiac calls. They've already been exposed to that stimulus, right? So they know how to react to it. It doesn't shock them as much. Through experience, through wisdom, right? They've learned how to pick up on certain things, like this thing that I see will allow me to determine the severity of this call.
Right.
This will tell me whether I need to go fast, or I need to take a step back, evaluate things. And that could be a car accident, a fire, or a medical call, right? It's experience. And I think it goes without saying that at the end of the day, if everyone had their choice, if I'm calling at 3 a.m. for my grandma that's got chest pain, I want the most experienced, the best 100%. Of the best. That's what you want. It's almost like, again, going back to the analogy of purchasing a vehicle. If I go to the car dealership, I want the best car.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
I want the car that I want, and I want it to be the best one. I don't want the car that I want that maybe got beat up and got returned twice. And again, that's not to say nor to throw any shade or shame on the junior employees that we hire.
No.
It's just experience. There's value to it. It's why people in administrative, command positions, they are more tenured. They are more experienced. It's why our battalion chiefs are typically the most senior employees that we hire, because they not only have to handle the administrative day-to-day capabilities, but when it hits the fan, we rely on them and their years of experience and their wisdom to objectively look at the situation and tell us this is the best course of action, right? To manage the overall goals and objectives.
Yeah. The seniority part makes a big difference in that sense, that where you want people showing up to your house that have been exposed, because the reality of it is, man, like if you have a heart attack at your house, you want somebody that's been exposed to multiple heart attacks already, right? Like as like a layman term to put it. You don't want somebody, because minimum standards, right? It's even the state of Florida acknowledges that, it's it's the minimum that we're comfortable with you being able to apply for this job.
Yes.
And then everything else, once you get hired, you have to go through a whole other process.
Yeah, you go through a promotional academy, right? For the most part, the standard for promotional academies is anywhere from 10 weeks, up to 18 weeks that I've seen. So it all varies from department to department. Our own candidate academy, our new hire academy, it's come a long way. When I first got hired, Nelson and I, we had a 4-day academy.
Yeah, with me too. They were like, you get hired and you're going.
Yeah, and it's not, and it's in no way is it to insinuate negligence on the part of anyone. It's just that was the standard back then.
Yeah.
It was the concept of this is how we did things, and it always worked out. And you don't know what you don't know.
And even back then, it was an improvement on what the prior practice was.
Yes, I'm sure that at some point it wasn't. There was a need, and it was you were hired, and here you go. Here's your uniform.
Hit the street and then
go get them, slugger.
So that brings, I'm glad you brought that up because that brings me back. And one thing you didn't touch on is that we do operate the fire academy in Marathon.
Yes.
So the Monroe County Fire Academy in Grassy Key, we staff that also. As Monroe County Fire staff that, and also all the people that are there, their officers, the training staff are Monroe County professional firefighter.
Yes.
Union members, and that academy. You have valuable insight, I think, also because you work at another fire academy on the mainland, but you can kind of speak on because we operate that academy and we provide essentially recertifications for the rest of the county. Also, we're talking about other departments.
It's a regional fire academy. We can and we do host minimum standards classes there. Okay, we've had different agencies and organizations host their own classes there. I mean, the IAFF has hosted classes there.
Yeah.
For those that don't know, the IAFF is the International Association of Firefighters. That's the parent organization for
fire unions.
For our union. So each union is its own individual charter, and that's the umbrella, which is the parent organization. But yeah, it's a regional facility. They can host classes from anyone. The Department of Health can host classes there. We've had disaster response classes with radiological and nuclear events classes held there. Like I said, the IAFF has done classes on mental health and wellness there. We've hosted, hazardous materials classes there. It's a regional facility.
The standards, the hot shots class that most people are familiar with now.
Yeah, not to mention, the academy also handles our annual facility training.
Right,
which we have to complete. Not recertifications, but it's continuing education, annual hours that we have to log for facility training, company training, engine operations, vehicle extrication, live fire trainings. The academy manages that, which, by the way, they manage it also understaffed and
on top of doing the standards classes.
Yes, they manage the standards classes. They manage all these other classes for outside agencies. They keep up with us there. The concept of us running on minimum staffing and trying to bring light to the fact that we are understaffed. It's not specific to operations. It's not specific to the fire stations. All across the board within Monroe County Fire Rescue, there are areas that need to be bolstered with additional staffing, and which, me personally speaking, I think would result in greater productivity. The Fire Academy does what it does with the personnel that it has. Logistics does what it does being understaffed. You know what I mean? The EMS division does what it does. Administration in general does what it does with sort of skeleton crew. It's a lot. It's a small amount of people doing a lot of work, and I think,
and it shows that. But I think also it's a testament to the efficiency of the people in those roles.
That's what I mean. When I say understaffed, I don't mean to say that they're doing a poor job. I think we've done a great job with having such few people. Those few people in those key positions have had to really just rise to the occasion and just get it done so that we can keep moving forward. And it is an exciting prospect if you start to think, what if we had ideal staff?
Right.
Across the board. What if logistics, training, EMS, everything, operations.
You're able to bring in more specialties for the public. Like you put on with Captain Ribbit, you put on the vehicle
the vehicle. It was that, again, hosted at the training academy. That was the first one that we've ever hosted here. I mean, and I can tell you, I do outside of the department. I work for, it's a private academy where we basically teach anything from technical rescue to hazardous materials to anything involving with operating fire trucks and stuff like that. So I am exposed to a lot of
other departments,
their employees. They come to us as students. And I mean, I can tell you with no amount of bias, and I'm looking at it objectively, I've trained with our people here. I've trained with their people over there. And by and large, by the majority, our people are typically just a cut above the rest. They are. And I think it's because we've had to adapt to this, this ideal, this sort of model of minimum staffing. Like, hey, listen, so to speak, and paraphrasing, no one's coming, you got to get the job done. And
I've had that said to me before is, oh, you're in Monroe County, or things like that. Like, you guys are really good at training department. And I'm like, training department.
Yeah.
What does that tell me? Is that we are producing a really good product when it comes to firefighters, but we're not retaining them. So all these other agencies are always, you put Monroe County firefighter on your application, they're like, oh man, this guy is, or girl, this firefighter is used to working at various roles, right?
Yes.
Other departments you go, and if you get hired and you're a medic, you're probably just a medic, and you're just that's all you're doing. You're a hydrant guy. You're just doing a hydrant. Like,
most of our firemen within inside of a year, by the time they complete their probationary year, our firemen they know how to run a truck. They know how to run a call. They know how to operate a truck. That's a big thing for them. When I was president of the union, a lot of the other union presidents, they would joke around about how, they would call Monroe County Fire Rescue as the Miami-Dade Fire Rescue Training Academy, and they would joke around about it. And it's all in good fun, but it was true because, again, they see Monroe County Fire Rescue on their resume, and they know that they're going to get a great employee. They know they're going to get a capable employee, someone with experience, because, again, experience matters, wisdom matters. They want someone who's had exposure to these things.
You're essentially a turnkey employee.
You're a turnkey employee. They know we hire you. You'll go through our academy, and it's because of the quality product that we put out here. It's a combination of not only what they go through in their new hire academy, but because, again, highlighting minimum standards of somebody that gets trained by, wherever they go to a fire academy, they get to obtain the minimum standards. Like I said before, new hire academies can range anywhere from 10 weeks to 18 weeks. When I first got hired here, it was a 4-day academy. Now we're up to 4 weeks. That is a massive exponential increase in the amount of time that they're there before they hit the field, right? But it's still below what a normal standard is, right? Huge increase for us, and it's reaped a ton of benefits. We see the difference in it.
Oh, of course.
But a lot of the experience, a lot of the fine tuning, right? In the academy, they'll get the rough shape. Then the new hires go out into the stations, and that's where the finer sculpting, I guess, is where it happens.
That's where you learn more your hands-on stuff.
That's when you learn more. That's when your senior guys or girls, they go and they impart the wisdom, right? The officers, they go and, hey, look, this is all the stuff that I've messed up on. These are the mistakes I've made. Don't make them. Do it this way. Try this. Try this. Try that.
Yeah, and I think it shows too in like the response that we provide, and like just the last few calls we've had. I mean, anything from like I can speak from my zone, that the calls I've been on, like in Mama's Garden, like that in Bicapit, the warehouse that caught on fire, like that didn't even have a chance to grow, right? Like that didn't really get out. Like it was fast response, it was aggressive. The Bicapit, the last Bicapit fire, where the home on stilts caught fire. The response and everything was so fast, and we were lucky that we got provided mutual aid from like Key West and NAS. They were there, but the response from like Station 9 and 10 and 8 and everybody else was so fast that, like, back in the day, man, I'll tell you, like, that fire was 10 years ago. And everybody saw how bad that was. The half that block would have probably burned down because they were able to get there fast, contain it to the structure, and it didn't spread to outer exposures.
Yeah, just the neighboring buildings and stuff like that. I think another thing too is understanding that for the most part, almost every zone that we operate in is to a degree of mixed occupancy, right?
Yeah.
Some departments, they have the luxury of, I work primarily in a residential community, I work primarily in a commercial community, I work in a high-rise community, right? Hotels and stuff like that. In Sugarloaf alone, you have school, right? Elementary, middle school. You have a hotel. You have a restaurant. And then we have residential. So we also have a marina. We also have a skydive center.
Yeah.
So it's these people that are stationed, these 4 personnel that are stationed in that zone, and they have to be able to respond to all
high-impact vehicle accidents.
High-impact vehicle accidents. So any dead man's curve, which for me, I mean, what I consider a dead man's curve is anytime there is a curve on US 1 that is paired with a beautiful view. Because what happens is that people are driving, they go around that curve, and then, man, look at that beautiful view. This is a perfect time to take a video.
While they're driving.
And then just so happens the person coming from the other direction is thinking, wow, look at this beautiful view. What a perfect time to take a video. And that's what happens with these accidents. Boating accidents. I mean, those are...
Yeah, a lot of people don't realize we're different. Like I said, every zone's a little bit different, right? Key West, like everything's tighter, closer together. They also need fast response because everything can go up in flames very fast if you're not aggressive because everything's so close and tight. A lot of old like Dade County pine homes and things like that. For us, everything's on stilts, right? Everything's on stilts. Most homes are wood build, right? Prefabs, things like that. A lot of like new plastics and that stuff, very like, I call it like young lumber where it's not, dense.
Yes.
So it burns fast, right?
Yep.
And because those are essentially like prefab homes that are brought down, put on stilts. But like for us, the big thing I always say is like, we have to be, when a fire call goes out, you have to be fast and aggressive because everything's on stilts, most of it. Most of it's on stilts. And once you lose the staircase, you lose the house.
Yeah, well, not only is the majority of things on stilts, but also the materials that are in homes these days are a lot more flammable. They're a lot more combustible, right? What's considered within the fire service as like legacy homes, right? Traditionally lumber built, okay? Those, and they've done studies on this, where before in a legacy home with, old-fashioned materials, you typically had, if a fire started, you typically had anywhere from, 10 to 15 minutes to safely exit the home before the fire got,
because the lumber's thick and dense.
It takes time for it to burn. Whereas now, a lot of the materials that we have in these homes are plastics.
Yeah.
Right? Any sort of degree or any sort of variation of plastics that are highly flammable. They're highly combustible. So what was 10 to 15 minutes before is now sometimes less than 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Before you're easily overcome with smoke or exposed to flames. So again, more reason to the fact that it's so vital to have not only experienced personnel that know how to quickly mitigate these emergencies, these fires and stuff like that, but that they know their zone. I know where I'm going.
Yeah.
That's a big thing. I got to be fast. I know where I'm going. I know what's next to this. I know what's next. I know that all the houses in this area are tightly packed together. I got row houses.
We got to be quick.
I have to be quick because if it gets out of control, I know I'm not just losing one house. I can lose 2 or 3. Another common misconception, I think, is that because homes these days are built more with,
code, I guess, in mind? Right?
Well, not so much the code, but instead of lumber, now we have a lot of homes that are built with concrete.
Concrete, yeah.
CBS blocks, anything like that. They're less combustible. And people think because of the increases in fire protection that fires don't happen as often. And that is true. We have seen, to a certain degree, a significant decrease in the frequency of fires. But the thing that I always point out to someone who tells me that
they still happen
is that number one, they still happen. But just because they're less frequent doesn't make them any less deadly. Fires happening every week versus a fire that only occurs once a year is still just as capable of overcoming someone that's trying to make it out of the house.
And you got to be ready from a response standpoint. You got to be ready for both fires the same way.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the argument can be taken even further, because a fire department that runs, 10 fires in a week versus one that runs 10 fires in a year, you still have to be just as capable to responding to those fires. More so even in a department like you have the concept of low volume, high risk. Right. Which is what we may fall under. It's a low volume department, but we're high risk because these calls that come out, we have to be ready for them. Right. Experience is vital, because you can't just throw somebody into the department and by way of repetition, they will quickly become acclimated to responding to those calls.
Yeah, and the citizens also, right, and rightly so, expect, and they should, that I guess the high volume response, no matter what, right? So like we talked about before, it's like you talked about, like, you can't, when a bunch of guys show up to your house, you can't just like pick and choose one.
No,
you're expecting the professional, standard, above standard service from everybody, no matter how long they've been on, right? And that's where you lean on the retention of the senior employees, is they are able to aid in that and guide that,
most people, again, the general public is not aware of the ins and outs of a fire department and how it runs, and while someone, again, a member of the general public or maybe somebody within the county, just anyone in general that talks about fires or talks about fire departments, and they hear about, they want more money. A lot of the time, it's not about the idea of wanting to be, paid as athletes or anything like that. A lot of the times, it's just about, fair and equitable compensation.
I haven't met a millionaire firefighter yet, so.
Haven't met a millionaire firefighter yet. Most of us, regardless of the fact that everybody wants higher wages, right? Everybody wants to live more comfortably. The idea for us is not just pay us more money because we want it. This is what the industry is, right? You don't know what you don't know. And part of what you do as president of the local, what the union does in general, and I guess also the whole point of this podcast is to get people to understand that that's what we're aiming for, right? We're aiming for fair and equitable compensation based on the industry standard. We're trying to turn the tide against, this is how we've always done it.
Well, I look at it too as from like putting my citizen hat on, right? Not just a union rep. Like, I want, if my kids, like, as far as me alone, I'm like, it is what it is. But I'm like, if my kids are having an emergency, I want the best possible people showing up, right? The people with the most experience, because I know the seconds, the minutes matter, depending on the every emergency.
Seconds, minutes matter on a fire. They matter on a car accident. They matter on any sort of trauma-related emergency.
Being able to make medical decisions.
Not only responding to, but being able to effectively mitigate that problem, whether it's a medical or whether it's an accident or a fire. They want somebody that can fix the problem fast.
Yeah, like we had during mini season, the lobster diving accident, and it's been all over the news. It's no secret. The gentleman got hit by a boat, but brought to shore. It was fast, effective response. It was essentially, I would call it aggressive medical response, right?
Sure.
You stabilize the patient, you get them off the boat, you get them in an ambulance, you get them on a helicopter, you get them to a trauma center as fast as you can.
Yeah.
And I think making those decisions in that moment, like when those calls are happening, that you can't teach that in school, right? I think it's almost like nobody teaches you how to deal with a cardiac arrest at 3 a.m. in the back of a cluttered home.
Sure.
Right? Nobody teaches you that in school.
Yeah. We learn in a very controlled environment. We learn in a classroom with adequate lighting where the air conditioner is always set to 70 degrees. Nobody's yelling at you. It is, okay, you're doing great, Tony. What's your next step? It starts with and
you're like
and that's how you learn, right? There's very little stress other than the one that you impose on yourself, right? The anxiety that one imposes upon themselves.
I'm gonna fail this.
I'm gonna fail this. I'm so bad at this. Other than that, they don't teach you the stress of the real world. And for someone who is fresh out of paramedic school to be put into this position, and then
can be a lot.
The cardiac. The CPR, the cardiac arrest protocol that they've done a million times in school on a mannequin, They now have to perform that same exact life-saving procedure, but in a trailer at 3 a.m. with just clothes and stuff cluttered everywhere. There's zero space to work. It is hot. The air conditioner hasn't worked since '98.
We've all had those calls.
We've all had those calls. Gutter medicine.
Gutter medicine.
Right? And it doesn't, the school is not designed to teach you how to respond to that. The job is designed to teach you how to respond to that. Right?
The crews teach you how to respond to that.
teach you how to respond to that. Your senior person teaches you how to respond to that. And the best way to get great at those things is tenure.
Yeah.
Is to be here long enough that you get to see it more than once. And now it's, you know what? This doesn't rattle my nerves as much.
It becomes second nature.
This is just another Tuesday.
Everybody, the I saw something the other day. It was like you could tell a successful crew when everybody gets off the truck and they don't even have to talk to each other.
Yes, that is very true. When everybody understands the roles, when everybody can realize and recognize what the nature of the call is and what needs to get done, and you can work seamlessly. I mean, that's when you know that you have an experienced crew. That's what the public should want. That's what, the visitors should want. That's what, county administration as a whole should want. And I know, obviously, everybody does want. Mm-hmm. Nobody visits the Keys. Nobody lives in the Keys. No administrative person within the county government says, I want subpar employees.
Yeah.
Nobody does that
Nobody
at all.
does that, yeah.
But it's just educating them to the fact that, hey, listen, this is good. It can be better.
Yeah.
We can be world class.
Of course.
This is what it takes. Right? Yeah. You can't fault them for not knowing what they don't know.
Yeah, what you don't know is what you don't know. I'm really big on that. What you don't know is you don't know. It's being like, especially like being a small business owner myself. Like sometimes you won't know there's a problem until like maybe a customer tells you there's a problem, and then you got to address the problem, right? So you can't, if you're in position where like you're in charge of anything, really. Mm-hmm. What you don't know is what you don't know, and it's not your fault because you have people in positions that should be handling issues, and sometimes it happens to everybody, right? Like every organization, that's why everybody is always hiring managers and things like that, because it happens everywhere. And I think it's like I said, it's a lot of that stuff is nobody's fault if they don't know, right? So I think the education part is important for it. Like for me, I guess, to go back to the experience and things like that, because of like when I went through Fire Academy, like I already, had my kid and things like that. I was already a father, and I've had other, I was working multiple jobs. I've made the career decision to stay a support person, right? So sure. I'm a firefighter EMT, right? But I've made that decision because I feel like I can make a lot of difference in that position from the standpoint of like providing support for the guys that are becoming paramedics, for my officer, just from the experience level, for not being on the front line, but it allows me to step back and evaluate the situation and be like, hey, what do you need?
The senior fireman is an invaluable position. It's not an official position by any means, but the senior fireman is invaluable because what happens is that, again, most people would think that if you're an officer, that means you're the most experienced. That's not the case. I'm an officer, you're not, but right. You have way more time on than I do, and that's the case for a lot of people. Staying, whether you choose to not be an officer, I mean, I think it goes not just with the fire service, but I think in all aspects of employment, in whatever type of job you work at. Not everybody is fit for a leadership position. Just because someone is good at their job doesn't mean that they're good at leading, doesn't mean that they can teach.
Two completely different things.
And I think, it sort of goes into the position of understanding that if you are in a leadership role, the number one thing you have to understand is that you are nothing without your people.
Yeah.
Like, for me, I appreciate my crew immensely because of the experiences that we've had together.
It's important, yeah.
Right? They support me. I help them in whatever way I can. As long as everybody functions under the I guess the guise of I am here for the person next to me. They are there for the person next to them. They are there for the person next to them. And we just keep things going, right? As just because I'm an officer does not mean I have all the answers, does not mean that I've seen everything that there is to see. You know, that's why you have a good core group of experienced people. They pass on that experience to the next person that comes along. And then before you know it, you have you end up with a world-class fire department.
Yeah, I'm sure you've had to learn that through experience too, because I remember, back when, I don't know if you were already lieutenant, I didn't think you were lieutenant yet, right, when you were president, or no?
No.
But you've grown through the department pretty rapidly, but I think it's more of like you saw a need at the time and you filled it, right? We talked about before, you promoted and...
Oh, yeah. Like traditionally speaking, I didn't always want to be in the fire service, but when I decided that I did want to be in the fire service and I understood the culture of it, the plan that I had for myself, or the vision that I had of my fire service career is not at all what it's been right now. I thought for sure I was gonna get hired on. I was gonna be a fireman, in the back of an engine. I was going to stay there for at least, 10, 15 years. Then maybe I'd promote to lieutenant, do that, for a few years. And then ultimately, just retire as either a lieutenant or a captain. But for me to have been hired on, within a year become a charge paramedic, then within a year from that, become a flight medic. And then immediately after that, become union president during Hurricane Irma. And then immediately after that, so to speak, within a couple years, at 4 years of starting my career, having done all those things, to become an officer, like it was definitely not a traditional route, I think, by any means. But I at every point in time, like the charge medic thing notwithstanding, but becoming a flight paramedic, becoming union president, becoming an officer, ahead of what I always thought, I have this plan, life had other plans. It was always that. It was, I recognized it, and truth be told, the Captain Ribbit and...
You've had other senior guys to lean on when you stepped into that position.
Yes. I mean, but it was also the things that they said, like Captain Ribbit and Captain Duran were probably the ones that said it to me most, is that if you recognize that it's there, and you have the desire to fix it, don't you have a responsibility? And I'm paraphrasing, right? But if you see that there's a problem there, don't you have a responsibility to try and fix it? And it was a question. It wasn't a command. It wasn't like, no, you have to fix it. You have to promote. It was posed to me as a question, and they both, in their own ways, that was sort of the question that they had posed in their own ways, in their own very different ways of talking. Anybody that knows them knows what I'm talking about, but in their own very different ways of talking, Ribbit and Duran, they both sort of posed that very philosophical and existential question to me. And it was, if you see that there's a problem, don't you think you have a responsibility to try and fix it?
Yeah.
And don't you think that promoting would put you in a better position to try and fix these things? They were right. And I don't regret it at all. I mean, whatever, any mistakes I've made, any shortcomings I've had, like I feel...
Part of growth.
It's part of growth, and I think I was very fortunate in the way that it came up, that when I was promoted, I was blessed with a good crew. I mean, I was paired with, he's a lieutenant now, Carson, that he came from another department with tons of experience. And he was the first person to open my eyes to, you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
I thought, I'm an officer now. I got this. And then he comes along, and never in any sort of like a confrontational sort of way, but again, it was by way of questions. It was always asking me, what about this? What about
giving you
that?
the opportunity to make the right decision.
It was giving me the opportunity more so to just realize that I don't know what I don't know.
Yeah.
And once I got to that point, I can now put myself in a position where, okay, well, now again, once I've identified that I don't know this, I now have the responsibility that I have to go out and learn it.
Right.
I need to. I have to. And, again, for better or worse, whatever sort of, whatever reputation I have as an officer, as a paramedic, as a flight medic, for better or for worse, like, I do think
I'm sure it's amazing.
So I've heard, but I have no idea. I guess it depends on where you ask. But again, for better or for worse, whatever reputation I do have, I do wholly attribute it to people like Carson, to people like Duran, to people like Ribbit, to Captain Vandervoort, Moose, people like that. They completely and utterly shaped. They've been sort of like the bumpers, on the bowling lane, as I've careened down the way and landed where I'm at now. And then there's plenty of other people that have influenced me. I mean, for better or for better situations. And it's just, that's what it is. If that experience had not been there for me, I would not
guide you
where I'm at now.
Yeah, it's funny you brought up Lieutenant Carson. I just thought of it as essentially he was to you and whoever else he had an impact on, to what probably our firefighters that leave here are to somebody else at a department, because he came here with experience, with exposure to experience.
Yeah, he came here from a busy department that ran a lot of nasty medical calls, bad fires. They've had bad situations, and he came here with that experience. And never once did he have an air of arrogance.
I was just going to say, it's crazy. When you talk to him, he's very humble about that.
He's a very humble person, and he is all about imparting wisdom and experience and knowledge to whoever will give him the opportunity to.
So that's good. I mean, I think we can wrap it up on that. And so, those of you that stuck with us this long, thank you. And again, it's Professional Firefighters of Monroe County podcast. And, this is our first pilot episode for our coffee talk. And hopefully you guys will tune in and we'll have a lot more of these in the future. Thank you very much.